offsetting a polyline can sometimes lead to difficulty. If I click on the polyline that outlines a dwelling here and go to Modify and Offset, and I'm asked to specify a point on the side to offset, I'll right click and just make sure that my distance is correct. I'm working here in the USA Imperial Decimal Feet system, so the distance for the offset to get a path around the drawing is 3 feet. So now I simply select the side to offset, and you notice what happens here. There's the offset fails. It's correct around this zone here, but in and near the entrance the offset fails, so we end up with a very unusual polyline. So I'll delete it and go back and select the polyline that we offset and that gave us difficulty, and we'll take off the filling, so we'll say no, and then have a look at some of the entries here. I select it. Can you see if I zoom right in, this corner here is 0, 1. A polyline would normally go 0, 1, 2, 3 for the vertices. So there's something odd about the polyline here. So what I'm going to do is to delete the polyline. No, that won't work for me. I'll undo it. I'll change my drawing color to red, and I'll redo the polyline. So draw polyline. I'll go from this end point to the next end point here, to that end point. I could easily have turned on end point, and in fact I'll do that. So I'll go to Settings, Object Snap on to End Point, and go OK, and then come back, and I don't want to repeat the O-snap, but I want to repeat the polyline from that end point to that end point, that one there, that one there, that one there, and there, and there, and we'll enter. Now we've got two polylines, that one and that one, so let's join them together and then select the polyline. So point 1 is there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So that looks to me as though that might offset properly. It hasn't got that muddled series of point picks. So let's fill it. So we'll say filled, yes. And now we can, and I'll just click away. It's red, of course. And now I'll just try and offset and see if it works. So modify, offset, pick the polyline, and we'll offset to this side, and we get a perfect offset without any difficulty. So the problem there came, let's select this one and say that it's not filled, so take the fill off. So that polyline there is correct, but the one underneath it is not. So I'll Tools, Draw Order, and send that one to the back. That should enable me to pick that earlier one, and then I'll change back to by layer. So now we have a polyline here indicating the dwelling, which we can fill. We might set its transparency to some relatively low figure, like say 75, and we'll OK it. And there we are. We can go into our plan view here, zoom in there, and there's the dwelling showing reasonably well. You might want to use a border around that one, and that's done by saying, well, does it have a border? Yes, it does. What's the border color? Pick some sort of dark color. We'll pick color 44, and that looks reasonable. So you can have difficulty with polylines that operate in is somewhat unusual way of picking. And the same applies to not that one, but this polyline here. Can you see it's got an overlap there of that 28, 22 or 28, 21, 22. There must be a similar sort of problem with this particular polyline, and we probably will need to redo it in order to have it work properly. I suspect if we tried to offset that line to create a small border, we would be in a degree of difficulty. So you do have to be a little bit careful with polylines where there's a double overlap. Well, here is another polyline in that same drawing which has some problems. Curve fitting's been applied. Let's just take off and turn back to lines and arcs. I'll just select the polyline again. And you see, if we look at the vertices, the first vertex is here 0, and there's the last one. So it's not, in fact, a closed polyline. If we try and apply our curve fitting to it, curve fitting works reasonably well, but we're still left with this rather angular piece in the center. If we say, is it closed? Yes, we can set closing on, and we can, if we say yes, and then if we say fill, we can fill it, but we get that sort of strange kidney looking shape. So that polyline has some difficulties. It's better to begin and end, close it as you are drawing the polyline. So let's say no, and no, it's not closed. What we're now going to do is to close it. So we'll click on the first vertex and then come over here and click on the last vertex. So now we start there, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can move this vertex out now, and we get a better looking shape, but it's still not to my complete satisfaction. I'd probably do as we did before. I'll unselect all. My drawing color is red. I'll draw a new polyline, and I'll just set some vertices. I'll do it crudely to show you what I mean. I'm just setting some vertices now to make a kidney shape, and at this point here I'll say enter closed. Then I can select that polyline and apply quadratic fitting to it, so I get the sort of shape that I want without that awkward combination of vertices. So there we now have it, and we could certainly fill it. So in summary, polylines such as this one or that one there or here, all polylines in a drawing need to be carefully managed to get the result that you're after.